Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members, for the opportunity to speak to you this morning. The Ukrainian-Canadian community has been the target of Soviet and now Russian disinformation for many decades. What many Canadians have difficulty understanding that this is not a case of homeland against diaspora. Our Ukrainian government is not targeting us. It's a foreign government, the Russian government, that has made us the object of their disinformation. And as my friends have alluded, CSIS has identified Russia as a foreign actor and player in disinformation. To quote from their report, Russia also continues to attempt to discredit Canada's Ukrainian community, falsely claiming that it is composed of neo-fascists who control Canada's foreign policy. And there's more that they say, but I'm sure you've read the report. So when our intelligence service comes to these conclusions, why is Canada still a safe haven for Russian operatives? One of the reasons is that some Canadian politicians, foreign policy advisors, and staff in global affairs hold a naive view of Russia and the threat that it poses to Canada and our democratic institutions. For over a decade, our community advocated for the ban on RT, Russia television, but that didn't happen until a full year after the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. RT was finally sanctioned by Canada, along with other Russian institutions, such as Putin's think tank, the Valdai Club. But no action has been taken by the government with regard to those in Canada who collaborate with these institutions. There are many Canadian contributors to RT who are allowed to operate with impunity. Indeed, some of them are invited to appear before Canadian parliamentary committees. Others are given grants from Canadian taxpayer money to produce Russian propaganda films. We also know that Canada is a preferred destination for Russian sleeper agents because there doesn't appear to be any detection or prevention of foreign espionage in Canada. They come here because we make it easy for them to establish their identities, all the while carrying on their spycraft. They then move to other allied countries, posing as citizens of a reliable allied partner. They're now Canadians. You know the story of the Vavilov family and, of course, Mikhail Mityushkin, who was recently exchanged in the Evan Gershkowitz exchange. He was a colonel in Russian military intelligence, a valued asset of Putin's. So Russia co-opts authoritative, influential, and persuasive individuals, academics, journalists, social media influencers, who Stalin called useful idiots, to repeat and amplify their narratives. And when these narratives are word for word what the Russian embassy and Putin are saying, why does no one ask why? We know that we're here to discuss the RT-run Tenet or doppelganger operation involving a Canadian company owned by two Canadians using Canadian social influencers. They produce Canadian-themed videos on hot-button divisive issues, and once they have the ear of a frightened and disaffected audience, they blame the economy and everything else that is wrong in the world on Canadian support for Ukraine, who are all Nazis, by the way. So the government has failed to do anything, and this creates a culture of impunity which normalizes this behavior of referring to Ukrainians as Nazis. And this has also posed a threat to our community, unfortunately. We surveyed our community, and we saw a substantial increase in the number of anti-Ukrainian hate-motivated incidents. We have asked two successive ministers of public safety to speak out and condemn this behavior, but they remain silent. We know that for decades, the Soviet Union engaged in active measures, operations to discredit our post-World War II diaspora, who were very critical of the Soviet regime, and we posed a threat to them. One of these operations, unfortunately, was the Deschênes Commission. Evidence in Operation Payback shows that the campaign to inflame the Canadian public by falsely claiming that the infamous Dr. Mengele was hiding in Canada. This was a campaign that was started by a Canadian representative of the Simon Wiesenthal, Saul Littman, who deliberately planted false stories. And once the Canadian public was sufficiently inflamed, the Mulroney government convened a commission of inquiry, which cleared all but 29 individuals. And yet today, we hear repeated calls for the disclosure of the names of these innocent people, over 800 of them who have several generations of descendants.
I'm sorry, could I get you to wrap up?
Yes. So we also would like to speak to the Russian propaganda film, Russians at War, which was produced by a former producer of Russian television, an example of the kind of naivete that we have in Canada, which not only condones but finances the whitewashing of genocide. So I look forward to your questions.